Hi everyone, Adam here. Welcome back. In this video, I want to show you how to create a chart that will compare the player to other players and highlight the player that we're interested in. In the last video, we created these charts that compare the player to a comparison cohort and training and testing session that we decide on up here, and we select the metrics that we want to look at down here. But let's go over to our chart data and gonna hit the pause button for a second. This video is filmed later, but something that I recognized in this data, and I want to make sure that you're aware of it, is that let's go to an example. And sorry for the discontinuation. But if we go to our testing dashboard, what I noticed in the way that I did things with the scores, and this is typical in sports science and anything that you're building out, like I didn't notice this until later on my calculations. But when I compare this person to their all-time best, the red line is higher than the black line. And now how can their worst be better or higher than their average, at least when we're talking about scores? Well, I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you how to change it. So in our chart data area here, and this is from the last video, we built this thing out, or those charts out. We use this data, and with this data, one consideration that I had in here was I wanted to only include values that are greater than 0. And because the score system includes 0 values, and those are the worst, essentially, what's happening is we're excluding those from our calculations and things are getting messed up. So, to fix that, with each of these worst items here, the position worst, the team worst, and the athlete all-time worst, we go into the formula. Pretty much we're saying if higher is better then, or if lower is better, get the minimum value. If higher is better, get the maximum value. And what we want to do now is we're going to remove this greater than 0 logic from our formulas. So starting at index for the minus and the max ifs, we just need to remove this here. Index our data, get whatever matches up with the column that we pick or the metric that we pick, and it has to be greater than 0. We're going to remove that, and we're just going to remove it in this part too. And when we're done with that, we can click enter, and now it should be 0. That makes sense. And we'll do it for the team one too. They're all very much the same. So remove this greater than 0 here. Actually, not sure what happened here. This must have already been removed. And for the athlete all-time worst, we're going to do the same thing. So remove the greater than 0 portion of the formula, and here also for the max ifs. And there are pros and cons that come with these different approaches, and I'm doing it this way because I know that my scoring system includes zeros, and I'm going to have 0 to 100 scores, and that's what I'm going to display there. You might display different things there where you don't want to display zeros, if you have zeros in your data set in particular. So now we have zeros across the board, and what we can do is we can copy these formulas and paste them here, and paste them here, and paste them here. And this looks a lot more normal, and it's okay. The position worst don't have to be 0, because when we did these score calculations, we didn't do it by position. We did them for the team, so that makes sense. And if we go back to our dashboard now we see that the red lines are at the bottom, or where their lowest score is, and we are including zeros now. So now, sorry for that. I'll go back to the chart data and we'll get back into what we're about to build. I'm going to make this more complicated than it has to be, but you'll see why, because I think it's a good feature to have. Let's go to our selected chart metrics, and we're going to copy and paste this beneath just to say, okay, now we're doing another visual here. We'll call this a player comparison highlight. I'm not very good with names, so that's what we'll name it. And now we're going to start the equations to get the information that we need. And there are a bunch of different ways to go about this. And some ways are limiting, others aren't. We're going to do it in a way that limits the limiting, if that makes sense, which will require a couple of steps. We could do it all in one step, but we'll be limited in how we want to display it, so I want to do it this way. The first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get a list of athletes, and these could be, you're going to have to decide on this. We want a list of athletes based on some criteria that you want to compare this player to. And it should be based around your interactions on this dashboard. For me, what I want to do is I want to compare this player to all the other people on this person's team for this camp, the camp that I select. So I'm going to use those two variables to decide the list of players that I get. You might say I want to get all the players that are this athlete's position for their team for the camp that I select, and that's fine. But for this, we'll go equals unique, open parenthesis, and we'll kind of go one step at a time. So we'll go equals unique, testing data, and let's select A2, :A. Now what this is doing, this is getting a list of all the players, a unique list of players that we have in our testing data set. Close the parenthesis and click enter. There's our unique list of players. Great. Now before we add criteria to this, we're going to need the player that we're interested in. We're going to need the team that they were on during this event. Because just because this is their current team does not mean that they were on that team during this event. And we want to bring back everyone that was on the team that this person was on during that event, because that was the cohort that he was being compared with. But let's move this formula down a couple so that I have a little bit of room, or that we have a little bit of room here. Let's go team. I'm just going to call it team. And to get the person's team, we're going to equals index, open parenthesis, and we'll go to our testing data, and let's select our team column, comma, match, open parenthesis. Now, I don't really want to get too far into this, but we'll do 1, comma, open parenthesis, because we have two pieces of match criteria. The first being the event has to be equal to the event in question, and the player name has to be equal to the player that we selected. So let's go name equals 1, and we'll fill that in later, end the parenthesis, or close the parenthesis, multiplied by, or asterisk, open parenthesis, and event ID, or column H, equals 1. They won't be 1, but for now they are, so that we don't have to go back and forth between sheets. We can close the parenthesis and go comma 0. It has to be an exact match, and close the parenthesis and click enter. I'll explain this in a second, but first let's replace this 1, where testing data A to A has to equal 1. It should have to equal the player's name that we select here, and the session H to H should not equal 1. It should equal the session that we selected here, and click enter. So now we see something interesting. Toon Squad. This person, although they're currently on the Monstars, they were on the Toon Squad when this event occurred. And this is important information for our list, because when we want to filter our list, we want to get the list of players that were on the team that this person was on at the time of the event that we selected. So now we can start adding our filter criteria, and I'll say team here, and maybe I'll go metric here, which we'll fill in later. Actually, let's just do that now. So for the metric, I don't have a formal drop down or anything to pick this metric from that we're going to create this graph for. Remember, we're going to compare players to one another for the metric that we select. So I'm going to put an equal sign, go to my testing dashboard. I'm going to use this overall score. Whatever we select here with this metric, maybe we'll put the graph down here. I don't really know. I wasn't anticipating having this graph or even going through it. Someone reached out about it. So let's put that. We'll use that metric as a drop down. So we've selected the overall score. Now back to this list. So we have a unique list of players. Now we need to add a filter on this, just like you would add a filter on a table. We want to restrict the number of names that come back based on certain conditions. It's almost like unchecking this guy and unchecking this guy because they're on a different team. So let's add a filter function in here. Open parenthesis. The first thing that filter needs is a range, and the range that we want is the list of names, so that's already good. Now, when we do a comma, we move on to condition 1. Condition 1, let's go to our testing data, is when, in our case, is when the team is equal to the team that the person was on, the team that the person was on that we selected, and also, comma, condition 2, when the event that we select is equal to the event in this list, so we'll go equals 1. These won't be equal to 1, they're just placeholders for now. And we can close this off and click enter. Now let's change the ones. So we want to get a list of names for when, or actually these should be D2 and H2 to H to match the range here with A2 to A. But we'll go D2 to D, which is the team, should be equal to this team, or the team that the player was on when they did this testing, and when the testing session is equal to, this session here, the one that we selected. We can click enter, and here are all the names. Perfect. These were all the people that were on this team during that testing session. Great. So maybe I'll move this down one more, and I'll just call this athletes, just so I know. And now these, what's going to go here are going to be the values for this metric that we selected for these athletes. And to do that, we have already done that so many times. Anything in this athlete value column right here, it all uses pretty much the same structure. We just have to manipulate a couple of things. So let's just copy a formula in here. And because these are older and there's higher likelihood that you went through this than this, let's copy a formula from here and let's paste it right there. So this formula is saying we're looking at our testing data and we're trying to match up F34, which is the name, to our testing headers, which are our metrics. Now that doesn't make sense because our testing headers have all the metric names. So we want to match not F34 to our headers or our metric names. We want to match the metric that we picked right here, and let's lock that in with $signs, to our headers, which have our metric names. And then we also say, so we want the average of the column that matches this metric when the athlete's name is equal to A4. A4 is the player we selected. In this case, we want the athlete name to be equal to this athlete, whoever that is in that row. So let's change this. Instead of A4, have it be equal to this athlete, and we'll lock in the F, not the 34, so that we can drag the formula down. And the final piece of criteria is when the testing session is equal to A13, or this session that we select, and that's all fine. That's why we copied and pasted this formula. That's what we want. So we can click enter, and that's the score for this person for that testing event. We can copy the formula, and let's just paste it down. And now we see the values for each of these people. The next thing that we need to do is we need to sort this list. We could have done this all in one shot, but it's not worth it, and we have a couple of other things that we want to do to make it look the way I want it to look personally. So let's sort this list from highest to lowest, and that's a key for me. I like when things are sorted, highest to lowest, because it's easy for me to see where someone fits when they're highlighted, instead of it being alphabetically and some in bars going higher to lower, and such. So let's go equals sort, open parenthesis, and what do we want to sort here? Well, we want to sort these two columns. So we'll go F34 to G. So we're going to sort everything in there. Comma, sort column number 2, because we want to sort by the number, which is the second column. And is ascending, doesn't matter. I'll say false for now, which means that it's going from lowest to, or it's going from highest to lowest. And we'll close that off and click enter. And what do we have here? It's just a bunch of blanks. Now, the reason why that is because there are blank values included in our sort. So you guessed it, we got to use the filter function again. So, and actually if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see all the names. But let's go back up here and we will say sort filter, open parenthesis, and we keep this range the same, but for our condition, which is right after the comma, we'll say F34 colon G not equal to or less than, greater than, quote, quote, or blank. And we can close off the parenthesis for the filter function and do a comma. And now we see that we're on our sort column here. And actually, I'm forgetting now, but it's reminding me that I cannot have multiple columns for this condition. I need to pick one. So we'll just go F34 to F. If that's blank, then we'll ignore it. And we can click enter. And now we have our list sorted from top to bottom. That's great. I can't display this chart as is if I want to highlight the person that I want to highlight in the way that I want to highlight them, because I want their bar to be a different color than everyone else's. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I am going to write an if statement right here. Say equals if. So if this name right here, if that equals the person that we're interested in, which is the person that we selected, A4, with dollar signs around it. If that name is equal to A4, I want this cell here to be comma blank. If that's true, let's make it blank. If that's not true, comma, that's false, let's take the number. And we can close the parenthesis and click enter. And what I'll say before this is I'll just say if error. If there's an error with anything going on in here, what do we want it to do? Let's do comma, quote, quote, which is blank. Close the parenthesis and click enter. Now let's copy this formula and paste it all the way down in case we have more names. And that's exactly what we wanted, right? We have a number for everyone except for this person. And the reason for that is because I want this person's number to be in a different column. So now in this column, we'll call this, I'll just call this player values. I'll call this highlight. I'll call this highlight just to be kind of organized. And I'll reorganize this a little bit later, but I don't want to waste your time with that. So now we're going to write another if statement. We're going to go equals if this name equals, we're just going to do the inverse of what we did before. If that name equals A4, or the person that we're interested in, comma, if that's true, then we want this value, right? Our main value. If not, comma, let's make it quote, quote, or blank. And close the parenthesis and click enter. And let's add an if error around this again. So if error, if there's an error with anything going on in here, what do we want to do? Comma, quote, quote, or make it blank. And close the parenthesis and click enter. Copy this formula, paste it all the way to the bottom, and go up. And there we go. Now we just have the value of our highlighted person. Now, let's create a chart. Okay, so let's highlight these values and go all the way to the bottom. Let's go to Insert, Chart. All right, here's a chart with all that data. And that was a stupid, all right, I'm going to copy this chart and I'm going to delete it because I just want to paste it near the data so we can see what's going on. Paste it near the data. Great. Okay. For this chart, let's edit it and let's change this x-axis. Let's change this. I'm just going to call this, I'll call this players up here, and we'll edit it and change the x-axis to be the players column. So I33 colon I, which is all the players in column I, and click OK. Now we have all of our players on the bottom there. We can see their names. And player values, that's great. So the player values is what it should be, which is K33 to K, everything in that column. And there's one value missing, or there are actually two, well, but that's a 0. For this person, we want their var to be different. So we're going to add another series, and we're going to make that one L33, colon L, or where just that individual player value is, and click OK. And the chart is different. I decided to do a dot, but if we go to customize and we go to our series, go to our highlight series, we can make this a column also. And now in our chart style, or our setup, sorry, and let's go stacking and standard. That just means the bars are stacking on top of each other, because what Google Sheets thought before was we had 2 columns for each person, but we're telling you no, just stack them on top of each other. Now we have our highlighted player in this chart. Now if we wanted to add values, we could do that, or we could just add them to this player if we want. Let's add data labels just for this player. And actually I'm going to highlight all this data here and remove the decimal points so that it's nice and succinct. And I'm going to remove the title. I'm just going to do a bunch of things here. Just styling of the chart, just removing the axes and changing the font size. Let's change it to 10 so that we can actually see the names, and change the color of these bars. So I'm going to have the player's bar be gold, and I'm going to have everyone else's bar be green, and or maybe I'll have it be that grayish color, and I'll change this font for the data label by clicking on it and going to the text color as white, make it bold. And I don't think that I even want a legend for now, so let's have no legend, and I'm going to make these grid lines. I'm going to get rid of these grid lines, or I'll make the grid lines white, and let's make the background transparent and no chart border. And I think that's okay for now. Sorry, I know I'm over time again, but let's copy this chart. I'm going to delete it from here. I actually did that with all the other charts. And let's go to our testing dashboard, and I'm going to paste this chart in here, put it right underneath, and maybe make it a little bit wider, and maybe I'll make it like that, and I'll make the font of this, I'll make the font color not that bold, and I'll make the label 10, because I kind of know what's going on here. And we could add data labels onto here too if we wanted to. And now let's say that we pick a different player. I'll pick that guy. Now that person is highlighted in this list, and it's always going to be sorted top to bottom. So let's try to pick someone else. Person got a 0. There they are all the way at the bottom. Let's pick someone else. There they are. They're highlighted in our list. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a nice little graphic. I didn't even intend to make it at the beginning, but that's pretty cool. So I hope that this video was helpful. In the next one, in the next couple, we're going to start dealing with strengths and weaknesses and how to go about that situation. And we're going to use the scores that we developed in previous videos. So I haven't really wrapped my head around how to do it without them, but if you haven't done the scoring system stuff, it might be good to do that. If not, you might get a little bit lost in the next couple of videos, but I think that identifying strengths and weaknesses is something that's really valuable and very direct applicable information from a programming perspective. So stay tuned. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you're enjoying the content. Can't thank you guys enough and gals enough for your support. Appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.